Hi, my name is Kathy and I'm the owner of Native Roots Perennial Farm and Garden here in Sanger. Today I'd like to share with you some of my experience with plants. My personal experience with plants is I've been gardening since I was about 2 years old. I remember my grandmother taking me out to the garden when I could barely hold a hoe, and she would be right there beside me with a shovel and teaching me what to do. And so it's just been a blessing to me all my life, and that's why I love plants so much, and that's why I love sharing it with you. I'm also a Denton County Master Gardener. We offer a lot of classes. You might want to check online for that. And I'm also a proud vendor of the Sanger Downtown Farmers Market. And I love selling my plants to those of you who have come by and bought them. But today, what I really want to talk about with my tips, the first thing is plant selection. We want to be sure that the plants that we're getting are the right plants for our area. In Sanger, we are zone 8A. So you want to check when you go to the nursery, do some research on the plants that you're picking out and be sure those plants are made for our area. Now, if you're looking for native plants, there's tons of, I'm also a member of the Native Plant Society and a nice nursery for them as well. I love to get native plants. The thing about native plants that you'll need to remember is they grow very deep roots. They do better in your garden than they do in a container. If you're looking for something to grow in a container, you may want to pick an annual plant. They're beautiful, they bloom like crazy, but you'll also need to do some maintenance on them as these flowers begin to die out. You need to do something called deadheaded, where you'll take the flower and actually remove it so that way it can bloom again. So that's important. You also want to be sure that if you do pick up a plant that looks pretty mature, that you consider, you know what, it's spring. I think I'm going to put on my gloves, although I already have a gardener's manicure, which many of us understand what that is if we have them. Gloves as well as our garden boots. They're very handy. But when you go to a nursery and you see a plant that looks bigger than the rest of them and not so small, this is probably a plant from last year. So what you'll probably want to do is you'll see tremendous amount of roots on the bottom. And if you go to plant that, you'll want to just gently take the bottom of this plant and remove a little of those roots and loosen them up a little bit, and maybe down the side, so that they don't continue to grow in a circle, because what will happen then is this plant will be stifled in its growth. It won't grow to its full potential because it will grow continually around in a circle. We don't want that, so you should consider that. Plants that are not root bound are not a problem. As you can see, this one barely has any roots at all compared to that one. But loosening this up, this is a wonderful plant. This is a sage pineapple. It's a pineapple sage. It grows a beautiful red flower, as well as it is culinary. It's great to add to your fruit salads. So the thing about gardening is not only do you grow beautiful things that look pretty, there's also some fabulous things to eat here. This is a trailing verbena that I told you that was more of a perennial plant. I'll mention a few of my favorites. This is autumn sage, which is a wonderful plant. Stonecrop sage. Let me try this again. Autumn joy stonecrop. This is autumn joy, and it is a wonderful plant. You can see that it barely has any roots to it because this has been divided out of my own garden. So once you have a perennial for 3 years, you need to think about taking it and dividing it and moving around your garden. This is a wonderful plant for your garden to move around. Another thing, if you're looking for a vining plant, one to grow up a trellis, this crossvine is wonderful. This is a tangerine crossvine, and it is a wonderful plant. A lot of people see trumpet vine. It is very ambitious, trumpet vine. I really don't prefer it over this crossvine. Crossvine would be my preference. if you're looking for a trailing plant. This is a wonderful one for attracting your hummingbirds as well as your butterflies. So that's a wonderful plant to consider. Our next section that I'd like to talk about is what we'll need for soil. Now, these plants are only going to do as well as the foundation that they're planted in. And we need to remember that the foundation for our plants is like the foundation of our house. So lots of times if you go out to your garden area and the ground is very hard and very dry, water it down, see if it softens up a little bit. But there's also a wonderful thing that Texas A&M offers, and that's a soil test. So if you look online on Texas A&M, they'll have all the information there about how to send a soil test off, and they will determine the nutrients that you need within your soil to be able for your plants to be at their optimum best. This means your garden soil, you can consider it for your lawn, you consider it for your flower beds. All of these areas, and it's about $10. It's a pretty affordable thing to do, is to get a soil test. So you might want to look at that. Thing about soil, whether it's in your garden or in containers, you want to be sure that that soil is soft. You don't want it hard. You want it soft. Now, this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether we're looking at soil that's moist or not moist. We want it soft and not real hard and crumbly, because it's hard for those roots to break through that hard stuff. It's like them trying to break through a rock. So you want to be sure that if your soil is hard, that you're amending that soil with some compost or something called expanded shale. Now, I am a big proponent of expanded shale. Texas A&M has something called earth-kind bed preparation. And the wonderful thing about that is you take your soil that's in your bed, you combine it with some compost and expanded shale. Now, what they do is they take this expanded shale, you can buy it in a bag. It's expanded shale, and it's about a 40-pound bag. Not sure about the current price on that. But take that and combine it with your existing soil in your bed and combine that together. Then you can add a little compost if you want to. I recommend compost as well with that. That just softens up your soil more. And that will be a one-time event. Once you do that, then you can put mulch on top and then dig your holes and plant your plants in that mixture. I recommend that because that is called Earth-Kind Bed Preparation by Texas A&M. And it is an amazing thing that cuts down on 70% of your watering needs, because the expanded shale holds that water and slowly leaks it out. So you're keeping a constant moisture level in your flower beds and your containers. I recommend expanded shale as well as mulch and compost. That's a great combination for your soil. Now, if you are, I'll add one little tip there. Okay, let's talk about organic soil. A lot of people think, I only want to use organic soil. That's fine. That's fine. Organic soil is great. But you have to consider, if you go to the nursery and they have used synthetic soil, soil that has been fertilized with synthetic fertilizer, you might want to think about doing an addition to your compost your soil with using compost, as well as if you want to use organic fertilizer, what you will need to do is consider that if the plant is not growing and it has been grown in synthetic and you put it in to organic, it's not going to survive well and develop like it should. It's going to be like a coffee addict not getting their coffee. It's used to having the synthetic fertilizer. Synthetic fertilizer and synthetic soils are different than the soils that are organic. So do a little bit more research with that. Just wanted to throw that tip in there for something for you to think about. Now we'll move on to talking about sun and shade needs of these plants. Many plants have designation, if you research it before you buy it. Be sure that you're finding plants that, I'm looking for my little, okay, I had the little coral bells. I had some little shade plants over here, but I don't know what became of them. Oh, they may be in the sink over there. The thing about shade plants is you want to be sure that they are in the shade. They will not do well in the sun. And the wonderful thing about these are called coral bells or heucheras, and they are a wonderful addition to shaded areas, as well as some ferns and some of your perennials like your vinca major. All of those do wonderful in shade. So these will add a lot of brightness. It's foliage. It's not a lot of color, but sometimes in the shade, you're not going to have as many blooms. So you're going to need something with bright foliage to brighten up that garden area in the shade. Now, if a plant says full sun, I'm not sure that it really means full sun in Texas. You can use it in full sun, but I'm not sure you're in the hot summertime. I'm not sure you're going to be really, really happy with that. Be sure if it's not a cactus or a yucca or something that can handle that full sun, you might want to consider partial sun instead of full sun. Things that say partial sun, believe me, they like partial sun, and don't put them in a lot of shade. So morning sun is always the best. The afternoon sun is the most difficult. It's the most hot. So we want to stay away from that in our plants as much as possible. So pay attention to where you're planting your plants. Even if they say full sun, that doesn't mean west afternoon sun in Sanger, Texas. I can assure you that. Ask me how I know that. The thing about gardening is I want to bring up one thing. If you were to come to my garden and my farm and see what I have here, I have a lot of plants. And I tell everybody, don't get discouraged with plants you lose, because every plant that I have here is a memorial to one I've killed. So the reality is you're going to kill plants, but you're going to learn from killing that plant what it didn't like, and that's going to help you be a better gardener. Every time you lose a plant, you learn something. So keep that in mind and don't get discouraged. The next thing we're going to talk about is watering. Watering is a very important part of the process of taking care of your plants. Most plants are very happy with moist soil. A lot of plants do not like being waterlogged. They don't like having a full-on setting in water all the time. What ends up happening then is you get something called root rot, where your roots of your plants actually rot. So if your plant root are brown, chances are you've got root rot. What you want in a plant root is you want white or very light colored. If they start getting brown and real, like almost transparent, you've got root rot. So you have to be careful that you're not overwatering. A lot of people think when a plant wilts that, oh, it needs water. No, not necessarily. What it may need is to dry out a little bit. You may have root rot. Sometimes you can overcome the root rot and sometimes you can't. So you got to be careful about that. And just because it's droopy doesn't necessarily it means water. Check and be sure that it's not being overwatered. I call it over loving your plants. And a lot of times you want to give them a lot of water because you want to take care of them and you're out there watering them every single day. There needs to be moisture to the soil, not mush, not a lot of water, not to where it's just soaking in water. So there's a difference in moist soil is soil that has moisture. If it's holding water and you can hold it up and you can squeeze a lot of water out of it, that's not what you want. Moist is where it just feels moist. It may make a little ball like this if you were to pick up the soil, whether it's in your container or in your garden. This is what you need. You need moist soil. Moist is better. Okay, we're going to get to the fifth thing now that we're going to talk about today, and that's food. Food for our plants. It amazes me, just shocks me how people think a living thing does not need food. They think if they just water it, that it's going to be okay. And it's going to be okay, but it's not going to be its best. This is a living plant. It needs food. Back to what I was talking about with the organic fertilizers, which are water soluble like fish emulsions and things like that, compared to the synthetic ones. Now the synthetic ones, I'll be honest with you guys, the synthetic ones do have a lot of salt in it. And in Sanger water, we have to watch because it has a lot of salt in it too. So you're giving your plants an extra dose of salt when you're using synthetic fertilizers, but it may need that. Worm castings, worm composting in your beds, that's the way to go. Compost in your bed, that's the way to go. Those are wonderful to use. Fish emulsions are wonderful to use for an organic, but you may need to supplement it if it's not growing the way you want it to with a synthetic fertilizer. They make wonderful fertilizers that are more or less time released. You can throw them on top of your plant out in your garden or in your container, and every single time you water, when those get wet, they release a little fertilizer into your soil. But your plants will need food, not just water. So either get a time-released one that is water soluble that you mix with in your watering can, and in the summertime, in the growing season, it's typical to probably want to water those every 2 weeks with a fertilizer in your water. If you don't have the kind you just sprinkle on top, and every time you water the plants, it gives the plant a little bit of food, and those need to be replaced maybe once or twice during the growing season. Now, when we hit October, November, plants in your garden or in your containers will no longer need fertilizer. They'll be fine. A lot of times in your beds, you don't need to fertilize a lot. But plants that you grow in containers, remember, you are their only source for food. In the garden, there's a lot of food sources that those plants can get from the soil, where in a container, they don't have that, so it has to be supplemented. So be sure that you're giving it a little bit of food. So today we've gone over plant selection, a few of my favorites as well. We've gone over the soil, the things we need to do to set a good foundation to be successful with our plantings. We've also gone over our sun and shade needs, which are very important. Be sure you're not putting a plant that needs to be in the shade, planting it in the sun, or one that needs to be in the sun, you're planting in the shade. It will not be happy there. It won't do for you what you want it to do. Another thing that we looked at today is our watering needs. Please be sure that you are watering. More people will kill their plants from overwatering than they will underwatering. So the wonderful rule of thumb to check to see, like in a container or even in your soil, they do make soil meters that you can use, and you can get these and look at the possibility of checking out how your soil is developing and with the soil meters. I can't get it out of this drawer. There we go. Soil meters are great for knowing how moist it is. You can get a soil meter, or the cheaper way to do it is take your finger without a glove on and check for moisture down to your first knuckle. If you feel it dry all the way that far down, chances are good that it is dry and it needs watering. The best way to be sure that containers are watered thoroughly is to water them till it runs out of the bottom. If it's a small container like this and you're keeping it in a container, you'll want to be sure that the water runs all the way through and runs out and doesn't sit. So watering is important. And last but not least, please feed your plants.